Politicians use the word investment so often, it has about as much meaning as when a leftist calls something racist. Now, you might ask, aren't investments supposed to be a good thing? After all, the word has a connotation of extracting value. But a brief look at the history of so-called investments in Idaho reveals that when the government spends money, there is rarely value gained for those who made the investment in the first place, the taxpayers. We will discuss this and more on this episode of Fiscal Fridays. There are three things you need to know about the public policy investments made in Idaho. The first of which is the government is very limited in its ability to make true investments. At its foundation, the Webster definition of an investment is to commit resources, usually money, in order to earn a financial return. In other words, you are dedicating some of your resources in the hope of expanding those resources over time. You do this when you buy stocks, put your money in a savings account, or buy gold or property. Businesses do this when they expand their reach, services, or capacity. This increases customers and sales that, by extension, will lead to more revenue. But what about the government? Barring a couple exceptions, the state does not derive revenue from more than the productivity of its citizens through collecting taxes. Under this system, the better you do, the better the government does. With this in mind, we remember that the government does not invest in the state. The taxpayers are the ones investing in the government's activities. Allowing the government to collect more funding for a project assumes the government is best equipped to tackle the problem. For things like roads, perhaps this philosophy is prudent. But for things like workforce development, education, poverty, healthcare, and many other examples, the government has all but proven that it is not the best tool for the job. The government offers more programs and handouts marketed as a way to give people a hand up towards success, though in reality, this creates dependency, and taxpayers will never see real returns in their pocketbooks. Idaho's investment portfolio is proof that this is a hoax. As one example of investments gone awry, look at the Idaho education system. A former IFF colleague of mine, Caitlin Shepard, wrote a piece last year breaking down student performance relative to state spending per pupil. Despite public school spending growing by nearly $1 billion, student performance remained abysmal. Only 1/3 of 8th graders in Idaho were proficient in reading or math in 2022. Even before COVID, these numbers were only slightly higher, with less than 2 in 5 students being proficient in reading and math. Yet Governor Little continues to tout his historic investments in public education. Sending more money to government schools means you must believe that they are the solution. But with these numbers, perhaps it is time for Idahoans to look elsewhere. Let's look at another example. Last week, the Medicaid Managed Care Task Force heard testimony from a group called Our Care Can't Wait Coalition. This is a group of several organizations representing Medicaid recipients with disabilities. Repeatedly, they argued that we must spend more on staffing and administration in the Division of Medicaid and more pay for providers of home and community-based services. They argued that short staffing and low pay is hurting patients and that funding these areas is a good investment that will reduce the cost of Medicaid. Spending more to spend less is just not an outcome in this scenario, however. Mind you that this group is asking for more subsidies for facilities, a higher cost to hire professionals, and more administrative overhead to replace existing services. Sure, at the moment, home and community-based services are cheaper than institutional and long-term care. But when you tack on a 30% wage increase for providers that just received a $31 million raise last year, that difference nearly vanishes. Healthcare providers and those on Medicaid could benefit from the additional spending, but taxpayers would remain the forgotten interest group. As one more example, this year, Idaho is spending $15 million on training the microchip workforce. But really, these workers are being trained for Micron's new factory that is being built in the Treasure Valley. This only benefits Micron because they now don't have to pay to train the 2,000 workers that will operate the company's unique manufacturing process. In the meantime, businesses that didn't get a government handout are hurting for employees as they try to manage training solutions on their own. In short, Micron had the government do what they should have done themselves, invest their resources to grow their business. Instead, they asked you to do it. Perhaps if Micron didn't spend as much money being a top sponsor for the Boise Pride Festival this weekend or paying the salaries of diversity officers at the University of Idaho, they could afford to pay to train their own workers. Just an idea. In all, government investments are really just spending. The question is, how much? The spending rarely yields returns for the people funding them. Things like roads, bridges, and water infrastructure are real investments. They work to accommodate our growing state and promote the prosperity of Idaho residents. But the word is grossly overused as cover for budget increases. In fact, IFF Legislative Affairs Director Fred Birnbaum revealed that Governor Little is getting a little overzealous with his investing of public dollars. In fact, the 2024 fiscal year saw the largest state government spending increase in 22 years. Governor Little better hope that his investments will pay off soon. Eventually, the river of money will dry up and the state will have to figure out how to address its rampant spending problem. Let me leave you with this. Very little of government spending is actually an investment, and Idaho has a long history of using the term to mask large spending increases at the taxpayer's expense. It is time lawmakers focus on allowing Idahoans to keep their money in their own homes and communities rather than investing it all away. Idahoans just cannot afford it anymore. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays or other great content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org. Thank you.